I'm going to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Haytham Al-Hamwi. Dr. Al-Hamwi was a political prisoner in Syria before the revolution began, from 2003 to 2005. And he came to Manchester in 2007 to do his PhD in occupational health. And after he received his PhD, he established the Rebuild Rethink Society as a voice for the Syrian community in Manchester. So I'll give the floor to Dr. Al-Hamwi.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for the organizers to giving me this opportunity to talk about the crimes in Syria. Today I'm going to talk in 20 minutes about the crimes in Syria before the uprising and after the uprising through my personal experience with the Syrian regime. I'll try to make it short as I can. Hafez Assad came to power in 1970, and he remained until 2000, when his son Bashar inherited the presidency. And my personal experience started at that time when my father-in-law, Abdel Akram, he was an imam in a mosque at that time, and the government ordered all imams to praise the late president and his son in the Friday speech. And my father-in-law didn't do that. He just gave an ordinary religious speech without mentioning any political issues. And that was enough for him to be arrested for 3 months in very harsh conditions. After that, in 2001, a group of young people, including myself, tried to participate positively in their society. And we started by having a public library. We were about 30 guys. Every one of us paid about £50. We hired a shop, we bought our own books, we hired the books of our relatives and friends, we put them in that shop, and we made it open to public. Just 2 days after that, the secret police, or the security forces, or we call it Mukhabarat in Syria, they came after 2 days, actually exactly 36 hours, and they closed that library, and they confiscated 104 books, including the Bible. I don't know why they took it, but anyway. And since that time, I started my journey with the secret police. They asked us to report daily to their offices in Damascus. Every day we go there at 9 a.m., stay there in a small room until 9 p.m., go back home, and then the following day we come again at 9 a.m. for 40 days like that. And during those 40 days, they asked us just a few questions, very silly questions about who ordered you to open this library, from where you got the money, why you called it Ways of Peace, who invented this title, all of these questions. And then the rest 30 days, they just, as I said, keep bringing us without any question. I'm jumping in the events, but in 2003, the same group had 3 campaigns. The first was anti-smoking campaign. The second was anti-corruption campaign, where we distributed this leaflet, which talks about bribery. A guy offering bribe to jump the queue, or taxi driver offering bribe to because he crossed the red light. We distributed this leaflet to discourage such behaviors, which were unfortunately common in Syria. The third campaign was a cleaning campaign. We went in the streets of my hometown, Daraya, which is 4 kilometers outside Damascus. Daraya, not Daraa. Daraya, just around Damascus. And with the help of our friends and neighbors, we cleaned the streets of our hometown. And in March 2003, we had this silent march against the invasion of Iraq. We walked peacefully and silently like that with some leaflets. And because of those campaigns and that march, 24 of us were arrested in May 2003. We were arrested by the security forces, and we were kept in the presence of those forces inside Damascus, the capital, for 3 months. The prison is in the basement, 2 floors underground, and we were interrogated for 3 months. Again, the same silly questions. You are a political party, give us the title of your party, or the name of your party. And because we didn't have any party, so just refused to say anything. And they beat us because they want to know the name, they want to know the constitution. And the following day they say, oh, we know that you don't have political party, but it's a preventive measure, because if we leave you, you will have political party in the future. So we have to arrest you from now before you do anything. And the following day they will bring us again to interrogation and beat us to know again what is the name of our political party and what is the rules of the constitution. It went like that for 3 months. After that, they released some of us and they referred the rest of us, 11 of us, to a secret field military court. That secret field military court, this is the formal title. It's not my title. This is the formal title of that court, a secret field military court. And to be exact, to be accurate, it's the second secret field military court. That court sentenced 9 of us for 3 years imprisonment, and they sentenced myself and another friend for 4 years imprisonment. But what about that court? We have to say a little bit about that court, because people will say, listen to the court, they think that it's a real court. It's secret because nobody knows where this court is. They took us in a car without window, and at the entrance of that building, they opened the car boots and took out of that car. And we entered that building. There was, of course, no families, no relatives, no lawyer, nothing. Just the soldiers. And inside the courtroom, which is 3 by 3 meters, there was the military judge in his uniform. So it's military, as I said, although we were civilians, but majority of political prisoners are being tried by military courts in Syria. When I entered that room, as I said, there was no lawyer. It was only me and the military judge. And he didn't tell me ask me about anything. He didn't say any charge. He just started by this question. Okay, if I release you today, are you going to do the same actions in the future? I said yes, because I've done nothing wrong with this. Everything I did is for the benefit of my country and my nation. And that was enough for him to shout, to swear at me, to threaten me that he will execute me. He will put me in prison for 30 years. At that time I had 2 children, so you will never know your children when you go outside the prison after 30 years. So he kept threatening for 10, 15 minutes. And then he finished by this question, do you ask for mercy? I said, I ask for justice. And because of that answer, he gave me an additional 1 year, and he sent me to solitary cell for 7 months. I will not talk too much about that solitary cell, but just very brief. When they took us immediately from that court to Sednaya prison, which is the famous prison in Syria. Maybe you heard about the Amnesty report about it. They called it the slaughterhouse. But at that time, it was not that bad. Just, I want you not to compare anything I'm telling you in 2003 to what is happening now in Syria after the uprising. It's totally different. That in 2003, the situation was very calm. The regime was not under any threat in 2003. So no comparison at all with what's happening today. But anyway, they took us to Sednaya prison. They took my friends to the public cells, and they took me to the solitary cells again in the basement, 2 floors underground. They opened the door, pushed me inside. It was complete darkness. I thought that this is the normal situation that I just tell you. Of course, they didn't. The judge, when he finished, he just said, take him to the prison. He didn't tell me that I was charged, or I thought that there is another sessions of, but nobody knows that it's already done and everything. As we know, before that and after, everything is written from the secret police, and the judge is just a play. Anyway, that cell, as I said, the complete darkness for 1 month. Then I discovered that there should be light inside in that cell, but coming from outside, from bulb outside, but that bulb was broken and nobody cared to replace it. So I started begging the jailer to replace that bulb. And after 1 month, he replaced it. But when he replaced it, I regretted that I asked him to replace it, because I discovered how miserable my cell was. The only thing I had in my cell was only 2 blankets, 1 plastic container, and the toilet, which is a hole in the ground. This is the only thing I had in that cell. But when I had some light, I discovered that the blankets were really disgusting. The walls, the toilet, the plastic container was black, not white. You know, the yogurt one. It was black. So the most thing hurt me was the how cold was my cell was. As I said, Sinai was one of the coldest cities in Syria, and there was no heating at all in the whole prison, not only in the solitary cells. But the solitary cells, as I said, in the basement, and it was snowing outside. So I was in a fridge for 7 months. So I had jacket similar to this one. I never took off my jacket for 7 months. Except when I had to take a little bath by frozen water. When they took me out of that cell was the happiest day in my life. Until now, I always repeat this. It was the happiest day in my life. I got master, but after that I got PhD, I got 2 children. I came to England, but nothing was really brought me any happiness compared to what I had when they called my name to go out of that cell. Although they took me to the public cell where I spent another 2 years, but the connection of the outside world, when they arrested us in May 2003, my father went the following day to the same building where we were in the basement. And he asked, "Where is my son? He came yesterday to this building." Said, "We never seen him." Said, "He came here. We drove here by the car and he entered this building." "No, we never seen him." I was under his feet. He was in the first floor, I was in the basement. And they said that we never seen him. I should say that this is the government. This is not a militia. This is not mafia groups. This is the government. This is the government in 2003, where as I said, the situation was very calm, no threat against Assad at all at that time. But this is normal, very normal in Syria. So my parents knew where I was from some leaks, from international human rights groups. They have their own ways, through their own links. They knew that the Daria group were sentenced by military court, by secret court, and they are in prison now, in Sarnaya prison. So after 10 months, when my parents knew that, they applied for a visit, and they allowed them to visit me the first time. During those 10 months, I didn't know anything about them, and vice versa. When they visited me, it was 2 barriers, and the jailer was between us. They never allowed me even to touch my children or wife or anybody else. And of course, the jailer was between us, so I couldn't say anything. Just, "How are you?" "I'm fine." "How are you?" "We are fine." That's it. The whole 30 minutes. So that actually, and literally again, that visit was sort of torture. It didn't bring me any happiness. That visit repeated again after 8 months. So the first 18 months I only had 2 visits. After that, I regularly at that time, the political prisoners have visits every 6 to 8 months. In July 2005, my father established a committee for the families of the political prisoners. At that time, there was some international pressure on the regime because of the situation in Lebanon. Al-Hariri, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, was assassinated, and our regime was accused of doing that. So that they were really shaking. So they arrested my father, but his name was in the media many times, not Syrian media, of course, Al Jazeera or some Arab media. So because of that, they released him after 1 month. And I was released after 2 years and a half. I was released in November 2005 by a presidential pardon. Again, by the pressure of Detlef Mills at that time. Just from this story, it's just when young people can't participate positively in their society, even they can't clean streets, or when an old man like my father, he was detained just because he's asking for his detained son. We should expect that this situation in this country will not continue like that, and people will, sometimes they will say enough is enough. And this happened, following suit what happened in Tunisia, Libya, and Yemen at that time. The Syrian uprising started in March 2011. And as you all know, maybe, it started by peaceful protests, and Daraya, my hometown, was one of the first cities participated in those protests against the asking, let's say not against, it's asking, requesting freedom and dignity. This is on 25th of March. This is my father. He participated in that march for 20 minutes, only 20 minutes, walking like that, silently. That chant, the only chant, we have the videos on YouTube, you can check it. The only chant at that time was freedom. At that time, even 2 months after that, in Daraya never mentioned Assad or toppling the regime or anything like that. It just, the request was freedom, dignity. They would say, Allah, Surya, Hurriya, Bas, God, Syria, freedom. That's it. Just because of 20 minutes walking like that, my father was arrested 3 times. The first time in May for 1 month. They released him. He had heart attack. He had stayed at his house for a few months. Never went out of his house. Maybe once or twice he went to the mosque. But again in September, the security forces came again. They took him from his house, this time for 5 months. They released him, stayed again in his house, never went out of his house. But again, the security forces came again and took him in May for another 5 months. The second and the third time, the only request from my father to the interrogators when they were torturing him, it's just why you are taking me again and again. It just once I participated in the protest and you arrested me in May. Why you are keep taking me? But there was no reply. The only reply was torture. He was 68 at that time. He was tortured by all means. He was beaten by all means in all parts of his body. They extinguished cigarettes in his chest. They took out his mustache. The second time they arrested him, they arrested my brother with him. And the officer in charge, he told my mom, I will send him back to you like Riyad Matar. Maybe you know Riyad Matar. He was one of my brother's friends. And he was arrested on 6th of September 2011 and sent back there to his family only 6 days after his arrest. But thank God that wasn't the case of my brother. He was released in March after 6 months, and he immediately fled to Jordan, to Amman. My father-in-law, he didn't participate in the uprising. He was against the uprising. He said that this Assad is very brutal and his regime is very brutal. All the international community is behind him. He will destroy the country and kill every Syrian before leaving the power. So he was against the uprising. But because of his history against the government, or not against, not supporting the government, 20 soldiers went to his house and on 15th of July 2011 took him from his own bed. And we don't know anything since that time about him. I hope that he's still okay on the right. All of these ways of torture, I didn't read them in amnesty reports or in human rights reports. I knew about them. I saw some of them when I was in prison anyway. But majority of them, they were told to me by my father, my brother, my friends who were in jails, in Assad's prisons. All of these ways of torture. My father told me they did this and to me, but nothing compared to what they did to young people. They were literally, as you majority of you know, they were tortured until death. In front of everybody, their cries. My father, to reach the end of the corridors, he had to step on the bodies in the corridors. Anyway, all of those didn't prevent the protesters in the cities. So Assad started sending his troops to crush the cities, starting from Daraa and sending to other places. Until that time, there was no fighting in Daraya, but the revenge came from Daraya in August 2012, where the 4th Division surrounded Daraya with other army fractions, and for 6 days it was like black hole. Nobody had the courage to go outside his house. And when they went out of their houses, when the army left Daraya, they found 700 bodies. 300 of them were killed in one day, and they were put in the basement of one of the mosques in Daraya. It was the biggest massacre before the chemical attack in 2015. And when the army left, the Daraya people put their beloved people in mass graves. As a result, as in many cities, not only Daraya, people decided to fight and they joined the Free Syrian Army, which was established before that. And as you know, the FSA captured many areas inside Syria. And the response of the regime, any area became outside the control of the regime, the Assad army started bombing that area continuously by all types of weapons, missiles, cannons, mortars, Scud missiles, barrel bombs, and as you know, the chemical weapons as well. And starting from those days, we start listening to every day 100 to 200 people killed in Syria. And the second attack started in Syria in November 2012. And as I said, 50 to 70 missiles every day, continuous bombarding, and the most horrible thing was the barrel bombs. The barrel bomb is a barrel full of TNT and some shrapnels thrown by a helicopter like that, and the wind will take it anywhere until it lands on our houses. This is in my town, in my hometown Daraya. So these are our houses full of civilians, full of people. And we lost through those 4 years around 4,000 people, although Daraya is only 200,000. And I can add to them at least 3,000 inside the prisons of Assad. Many of them disappeared maybe. So the destruction reached the amount of 80% of the buildings in Daraya. And at the end of 2016, the Assad regime was enough with Daraya, backed of course by Russia and all of Iranian Hezbollah. So they intensified their shelling on Daraya, and they intensified their siege. And they start, for example, this is the hospital, the field hospital. It was hit by Nepal and kept the fire stayed there for maybe 3 days. And as you know, when they started their attack on Daraya, they make a complete siege around Daraya, started from November 2012. But at that time, Mu'addamiyya near Daraya was under the control of the FSA. So there was some way to bring something inside Daraya. But when the Mu'addamiyya became again under the Assad control, it was complete siege. Daraya became under complete siege. So nothing can enter Daraya. But the international community tried, and then they managed twice to send convoys. The first convoy reached empty to Daraya, apart from some lice shampoo and mosquito nets. The second convoy was a bit better than that. So Assad regime, backed by Russia, as I said, managed to regain Daraya, and the people of Daraya surrendered in August 2016. And the Syrian regime with Daraya, specifically with Daraya, he insisted to make it empty. With other places, he allowed the civilians to stay. In Daraya, he was very upset from Daraya. He said that it should be empty. And after being inhabited for around 4,000 years, Daraya now is a ghost city. This is Daraya today. This is my final slide. This is one of the guys before he left Daraya, managed to take those videos. We will reach at the end to the house, to the building of my parents. It is 5 floors building. You will see how this 5-floor building is now. This is the building now after this tree. Yeah, this is 5-floor building. It's like a biscuits now. This is all my documents, all my memories are under these cellars. Before watching this video, my mother kept nagging, I want to go back to Daraya, I want to go back to Daraya, I want to go back to Daraya. But after watching this video, she stopped. Now, people are killed under torture, people are disappeared, people are killed by missiles, people are refugees and destruction. But nothing, what happened to me is nothing compared to what happened to others. Paul will tell you more about that. People lost their families, lost their entire families. People lost their body, half of their bodies sometimes, their eyes, their legs. I'm safe here in the UK, my families are safe in Jordan. But this is, thank you very much.
The next speaker is Paul Conroy. So Paul is a British freelance photographer and a filmmaker. He also happened to be a soldier with the Royal Artillery. and he's worked extensively as a journalist in combat zones in the Balkans, Middle East, and Libya. In February 2012, he was in Homs in Syria, and he was injured gravely while covering events from that city, which was part of the territory of the Syrian opposition at the time. So at the time, the building where he was with other journalists was shelled by government forces, and 2 of his colleagues were killed in that attack. And he's going to talk to us about his experience.
How are you doing? I think war crimes, is the central issue here. And I've covered many conflicts around the world. And I've seen war crimes, obviously. I've seen war crimes. But my partner, Marie Colvin, who you probably all heard of, who was killed on that day, we just spent a year in Libya watching what Gaddafi was capable of. The siege of Misrata, we spent 3 months as they just shelled that city. They reduced it to rubble. And we both said then, this is the worst that is. We can't see any how do you get any worse than what they were doing? We were going out every night in ambulances and just scooping bodies into bags, what was left of people. But funnily enough, we'd met in Syria in 2003, just before the last Gulf War, and I tried to build a boat, because they wouldn't let us into Iraq. We wanted to get into and shoot the war. So I tried to build a boat out of lorry inner tubes, and was like paddling across the Tigris River at night when the Syrian army found me and captured me and shot the boat up and that. They said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm looking for refugees." And they're like, "Don't believe you." So they threw me out of Syria. So I was already banned by the time the revolution, the uprising started. Marie was refused a visa, and I was already like, "You better not come back here, mate." So together we decided that we would go through illegally. We didn't want to go into Damascus. We didn't want a guided tour of what the regime wanted us to see. That isn't the kind of reporting that I do or Marie does. So we made the journey from Beirut with all sorts of smugglers, gun runners, anyone who could get us to that border. And for the first time, we crossed that border. And when you cross the border into Libya, you're into like rebel-held territory. When you cross the border from Lebanon into Syria, you step into the middle of, regime territory. This is held by the regime. There are no safe areas where we were. The Free Syrian Army in 2012 was a very, very fledgling organisation. Popular to popular belief, it wasn't an armed uprising. It was a peaceful uprising. They were asking for, a slightly more, liberty, slightly less aggressive methods of government. And the Free Syrian Army were basically people who had defected in order to protect the people who were demonstrating. When me and Maria entered Syria, it took us 5 days to travel 15 kilometers to Homs, where we sat outside of Homs, and we just waited. Now, Homs at that time was under siege, and it's hard to describe siege. It sounds medieval, and actually this was medieval. They'd taken the whole city, they dug a trench around the areas that they deemed troublesome. They had a whole division, the 4th Division, that was commanded by Maher al-Assad, Bashar's brother. And this siege was total and complete. There was no food going in. there was no medicine, and this division, this mechanized division of wide area battlefield weapons were being fired on a 24-hour basis into civilian neighborhoods. Now, obviously the regime will say this was the stronghold of the Free Syrian Army. You know, the Free Syrian Army in Homs consisted of about 150 guys on Kalashnikovs and about 3 RPG-7s. You do not need a mechanized division to crush this. There were also 28,000 civilians in the area of Baba Amra. It took us a little while to persuade them because they thought we were nuts. You know, people were trying to get out of this siege, and there's us two there going, can we go in? And they go, what? So it took a little bit of smoothing, and eventually they got to trust us, and they said one day, you know, we were watching what was happening, because the activists were live streaming. You know, we were just watching a town being reduced to rubble on a you know, minute by minute basis. They were just crushing. Now, I don't have to tell anybody that's a war crime. You know, deliberate targeting of civilians, number one. Starvation, not very nice. No water getting around. It was winter, the fuel was cut. These people were under desperate circumstances. So we had to go in through, we had to crawl in through a 3-kilometre sewer tunnel to get in to the region of Baba Amra. And both Marie and I, when we popped up out of that tunnel, we just looked at it, and you know, maybe 50 years between us covering war, we just looked at it and went, my God, I've never seen anything like this before. We arrived at midnight, you know, bit by bit by bit by bit. Look, they got us to what was called the media centre. The media centre was a 3-storey building. It already had the top storey blown off. So there were 2 stories. And this is where the world was getting all its information about the siege of Homs from this essentially one room with media activists, you know, very, very brave young men who would go out and film and transmit and get the stories out. The next morning we woke, and it was, normally you have to look for a story. You know, we opened the door and the story was there. The story was plain to see. There wasn't a building that was intact. The first people you speak to say, we lost all our family yesterday. We lost, you know, we were overwhelmed with the amount of death, and not just wide area battlefield weapons being used on civilians in an urban environment. You know, I remember vividly a lady coming up to me with her baby, and she just looked and she said, maybe can you fix my baby? You know, so I unwrapped the baby, and about half of the baby's head was gone, and it was green mold, but she was carrying it around like it was still her baby. It was still her baby, but you know, this baby had been dead a long time. And you know, I mean, what do you say to somebody? You know, how do you explain that this is happening because you think this is a military stronghold? You know, you can't explain that. As time passed, it intensified. You know, we thought we'd seen everything. It kept getting heavier. The bombardment, the artillery bombardment reached a crescendo to the point where they said, the activists who were getting the information out said, look, if you guys don't get out now, you're gonna die. You know, we're leaving half of our people here, the rest of you are going. So they forced us out, so we had to crawl back through this
down the tunnel, another 3 kilometres out. And the next morning, Marie woke me up and she goes, Paul, we fucked up basically. They didn't come in last night. So we'd left 28,000 people besieged, starving, freezing, being massacred on a daily, hourly, minute scale, and that wasn't something that me and Marie could actually cope with. So we didn't really tell our editors, and we told them that, oh, we're going to go to Hammer, which was just further up the road, and they were like, okay, that's good. Observe it from the outside. But the next day we sneaked back in. You know, we said to the guys, like, we want to go back. You know, when we walked in, you know, these people were just like, what the fuck are you doing back here? We got you out 2 days ago. It was like, yeah, we can't really leave. But for the next 2 days, I mean, if you thought, if I could describe to you the hell that was rained down on them people, the next 2 days it intensified to the point where they were just coming in and saying, they're dead. You know, we'd go to the field clinic and there'd just be body parts, there'd be bodies stacked high. And as fast as that somebody come on gurney and the doctors, Dr. Mohammed and Dr. Ali, would look at them and try and do something, they'd die. They had no choice but to just stack them on these gurneys. And this was going on a basis that was just regular. You know, there was nothing. They had no drugs, no medicine. They had nothing to cope with this massacre. You know, we witnessed the massacre of civilians. No doubt, nobody in some government or some troll is going to tell me that I didn't see what I saw. You know, I saw it, Marie saw it. Our editor was also getting these pictures that I was sending back. And we got a call one night saying, look, you know, you guys have got to get out, the game's up. But me and Marie had already, we'd had a discussion, and you know, it was Tuesday or Wednesday. And I said to Marie, I think we should have a little chat. You know, I said, I don't think we're going to be alive by Friday to file a story for the Sunday Times. I said, what should we do? You know, there's no point us being here. Just, you know, so shall we go live? Should we tell the world live what's happening? And we spoke with the activists in the building, and they said, that's what you're here for, that's what we're here for. So we did interviews on Channel 4, BBC, CNN, where Marie described in, you know, quite touching detail the death of a small baby boy just because the doctors had nothing they could do. 7 o'clock the next morning, I had 2 shells that were quite close, 2 rockets. 30 seconds later I had another 2 rockets, and at that point me artillery, I used to be in the artillery, it clicked in what was happening. They were bracketing in on the field in the media centre, and then, you know, the first rocket hit, and I tried to grab the camera, second rocket hit, third rocket hit, and then, you know, sadly the 4th rocket hit direct, killing Remy Oshwick, Marie Colvin. I got a big hole. I thought I'd been hit by a lump of rubble. It felt like I just felt a little bump on my leg, and I went, oh. And I bent down, touched it, and my hand come through out the other side of my leg, and I was like, shit. But rather bizarrely, I was stood there going, oh no, hospital food. You know, lumpy custard, gravy, and it's like, oh, people can bring your food in, that'll be alright. And then came to a bit, and, you know, had the tourniquet on. I went to look for Marie and Remy. Remy was dead. And then they started attacking again. They saw movement from the drone, so they thought, we'll attack again. So it was about another 20 minutes, before they could take me into the building. From there I was taken to the field hospital where I knew they had no anaesthetic or no painkillers, and you know, I wasn't the worst injured. There were people there, you know, were in terrible, terrible pain. But the thing was, they took me to a place that I knew was the target. That field hospital, you do not, under international law, target hospitals. So there's another war crime, you know, I mean, so you're going on, I can make you a very long list of war crimes that I saw going on. But you do not target hospitals, and unfortunately I'm kind of blown to quite a few bits. And they take me to the place that has got the biggest, you know, that is the target. And Dr. Mohammed, I walked in, Dr. Mohammed goes, "Oh, hello, Paul." I'm like, "Hello, doctor." He said, "What's wrong with you?" And bit of a hole in the leg, old chap. And he had a look and went, "Oh yeah." But they had nothing to do, you know, they got a toothbrush and a bottle of iodine, filled it up, scrubbed it out, and then stapled it together with an office staple gun. And then this carried on. You know, this didn't stop because they got us, you know, targeting civilians is a war crime. Targeting journalists is a war crime. Starvation as a method of war is a crime. You know, I mean, the list builds and builds and builds. And you know, the next part of the phase was that, you know, we had to sit and wait for 5 days to try and escape. They blew the tunnel up that we'd come in on, so we had no way out. They sent the Red Crescent, and the head doctor of the Red Crescent said, "Do not get in the ambulance because you'll be executed and put on the field, and they will put out the story that the rebels killed you. Do not get in the ambulances." So we just had to kind of sit and wait for some. They took Marine Remy's body away, and the 3 of us sat in a room for 5 days, which they knew we were in. So they deliberately targeted civilians and journalists again and again and again for 5 days. And after 5 days, I think 20 of us set off. But they came in, they just said, "We're going to try and get you out now." I think out of 20 of us who set off, perhaps 3 of us lived. You know, the rest were just blown to pieces or shot or whatever, or en route. And I escaped through a tunnel on a motorway. And I got out, you know, and I didn't say block the media from the room. I said get them in the room. I said because, you know, dead, there was I think 7,000-8,000 people dead. And then when you tell the world, you think by telling the world, you know, very bad things that happen in there, things that you would not comprehend, and tried to tell the world. And I think it's been an absolute and total disgrace, the response to Syria. The Syrian people have been lied to. They've been used in these big geopolitical struggles. I think there are so many people who are responsible for this, but I think there are also a lot of people who should be standing in front of judges answering questions on just exactly what they did in Homs. And that's one city for a couple of weeks. I think how long has it gone on now?
Speaker is Anne Hanna. Anne Hanna is from Freedom from Torture, which is an NGO based here in the UK. She joined Freedom from Torture in 2016 from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. In her diplomatic career, Anne looked at issues around conflict and fragile states, including women, peace and security, transitional justice, and security sector reform. And she, as part of the FCO, she's also been posted to Syria, Kosovo, and Iraq. Please welcome Anne.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel tonight. You'll be pleased to know I don't plan to speak for 15 minutes, so okay, sorry. I don't plan to speak for 15 minutes. For anyone who didn't hear that, I will be a bit shorter. But I thought I'd start off tonight by talking a bit about what it is that Freedom from Torture does and how we use the information that we gather as a charity to contribute to accountability. As Karine said, we're a UK-based human rights organisation, and we're dedicated to the treatment and rehabilitation of torture survivors. And we have 5 centres kind of around the country, and we support around 1,000 survivors of torture every year. And over the last 30 years since we were established, we've received around, it's probably a bit more than this now, but over sort of 57,000 referrals of survivors of torture to our centres. And sadly, we only accept a third of those who are referred just because of capacity reasons. But just to sort of paint a picture of the kind of numbers of people who find themselves in the UK having fled from torture, kind of generally, and that's obviously before the Syrian Revolution and the Arab Spring. So what do we do? So in addition to the kind of therapeutic support and rehabilitation services that we offer, we also forensically document torture, and our independent doctors complete medical legal reports, usually in support of people's asylum claims. But then we use those medical legal reports to carry out research into the data analysis that we do looks at who is being targeted, why people are being tortured in any country, where might they be at risk. There's often kind of a lot that we can kind of gather from people's testimonies about due process, places of detention, sort of patterns of detention between different security services, and so we sort of every year we produce research based on those. And we also have a particularly strong emphasis on survivor activism as a kind of central tenet of our work. And we work with survivor advocates through an organisation that sort of sits within Freedom from Torture called the Survivors Speak Out Network. And we help survivors to get their voices into policy spaces. But critically, not just because they are survivors, but because of the expertise that they bring to that space. And so we have a very strong ethos of not using people's testimony to get them into that space, but using their expertise and their experience, and recognising the expertise and experience that they bring with them, so that they are not just defined by the torture that they've suffered. So in terms of kind of what we're doing specifically kind of around Syrians at Freedom from Torture, there's a recent government report by the National Audit Office that was looking at the efficacy of the Syrian Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme. I think I've got the acronym right there. They estimated that 55% of Syrians who are resettled in the UK under that scheme are survivors of torture. I don't think I need, after Haytham and Paul's kind of presentations tonight, to go into the detail about the sort of horrific nature of the torture that is coming out of Syria. And everyone will have seen the reports, and there's a Channel 4 film coming out, I think, next week that I would really recommend. It's very, very moving. But one of the things that's quite important for us is that the survivors that we're supporting at Freedom from Torture are both linked to the current conflict, and also, as Haytham kind of highlighted in his presentation, we've also been supporting torture survivors for the last 30 years from Syria. There's 40 years of human rights abuses that have intensified in this period, but we can't forget about the survivors of previous human rights abuses either. And those survivors come to us with really complex health needs, obviously very severe PTSD, often very severe physical injuries, and the impact of that the impact of the torture that we see both in Syrians but also in other groups is that torture is designed to remove people's voices. It's designed to silence people. As Haytham found when he spoke out, the response regime is to try and take away your voice and either take you out of society or put you back into society so terrified that you would never dream of doing it again. And sort of coupled with that are also issues like layers of stigma that come around being tortured. Often, there's sort of no smoke without fire. I was about to get that the wrong way around. Kind of attitude prevails. You must have been arrested for something. You must have been tortured for something. There must have been something you did wrong. Really stigmatizes the person. It's very hard for them to talk about their torture, and we see this even when it would help people to identify themselves as a torture survivor for their asylum claim. It's still incredibly difficult. You shouldn't underestimate how difficult it is for people still to acknowledge that that's part of their experience. And when you add on the horrific levels of sexual violence that are being reported taking place in detention facilities in Syria, coupled with the stigma that often surrounds mental illness, and so someone who's suffering with PTSD may also have that level of stigma to kind of deal with and try and kind of reconcile. It makes it all very difficult to seek help. And then, of course, if you're in the UK, you have the stigma of being an asylum seeker or a refugee, or sadly, a Muslim, or kind of whatever. The whole layers of complexity of stigma that then happen when you're in displacement and in a foreign country. And I think that's why we focus so heavily on trying to help people to regain their voice as well as their kind of rehabilitation from their torture, and see that as an essential part of their journey to rehabilitation. So the survivors that we work with are all very focused on the need for accountability. They talk about it really powerfully. And they talk about it in terms of they want to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to anyone else. They want recognition about what they suffered, that was a legitimate experience. And sort of importantly, sort of within that, they want the kind of government or the regime or the kind of people who were responsible for perpetrating what happened to them to recognise it. So, they may find that recognition in the UK, but kind of hearing the officials who sanctioned that torture, or being held to account for it, and acknowledging that happened and that was a feature of the conflict, is often really important to people for a sense of sort of validation about that their experience sort of was real in a way. And also, they want perpetrators to fear a consequence, which sounds really obvious when you live in a country like the UK, where someone might be worried about being arrested and face a jail sentence. But when you have 40 years of human rights abuses, you have a system that just casually has this level of violence as a feature. It's very hard, I think, for people to imagine a security situation or a state that governs without that sense of total impunity. And so they often sort of talk to us about, kind of that essential need to kind of break that cycle of impunity and kind of create accountability for security forces. So these sort of factors really shape how we use the research reports that we produce. And the problem with Syria is, of course, we don't know exactly what the shape of accountability will look like in the future, or who we might be dealing with in that process. So what we are already starting to do is kind of build up that evidence base on the Syrian clients that we've got, and sort of carry on developing that so that we're ready to contribute to it when we can. But at the moment we use it to lobby governments, to contribute to UN mechanisms, to contribute to kind of EU mechanisms, and they're all, the trouble with all of these diplomatic initiatives is nothing happens quickly, and so it's an incredibly frustrating process to engage with and submit evidence to. But we kind of hope that even by being able to show the impact and kind of remind people and policymakers of the kind of human cost, and that there is a person at the end of this process. It's not just a sort of academic debate in the Security Council that's removed from the horror of human experience. That we can kind of keep reminding people that there's an ongoing and real human cost to this terrible, terrible conflict. And of course as well, because we are in the UK and because most of our clients come to us through the asylum system in various different ways, we also do a lot of work to lobby the Home Office to make sure that their analysis and the decisions that they're making around asylum reflect real risk profiles. And that isn't so kind of critical in the current stage in Syria, but over time that will be, because if Assad were to go tomorrow, then there's this perception that as soon as the shooting stops or the bombing stops, that then the human rights abuses stop. And that's so not true. I mean, if you've had 40 years of impunity, there's no reason to suppose that those structures disappear and dissolve overnight. And so again, for us it's about building up a kind of body of evidence that then we can use to kind of keep up that pressure and challenge these assumptions sort of over time. And sadly that's very little consolation to people who are suffering torture in the current time, but sort of that's sadly where we are. So I think I was going to say actually some of the things that I think are challenges around accountability are, I mean, for us it's very important that survivors stay at the heart of accountability processes. There's too much accountability done to survivors. And you see through kind of the ad hoc tribunals of the past and even the ICC process, it really is not very victim-centric. And so one of the things that we're very interested in is how you ensure, or how you try to keep survivors at the centre of those processes, and not in a lip service way. Kind of I bumped into a survivor in the corridor and asked them if this was okay, and they said, yeah, this is fine. That's not a consultation with survivors, that's not shaping a process with survivors at the heart of it. And I think there is a lot more that we could all be calling on the international community to do to just bring the people who are really affected by these processes. And it's not just torture survivors, of course, that applies to other groups who are particularly targeted in this conflict. But also, it's a real struggle for us, accountability processes, particularly national accountability processes, to take into account the experiences of people who have been displaced by the conflict, either because they can't access them, or because there is a kind of snobbery almost about you haven't been in the country for 2 years, your experience is somehow worth less than someone who is still there, and of course that just completely disempowers or further disempowers the survivors who had to flee through no fault of their own. And I think most difficult of all, and this will almost certainly be the challenge in Syria, because I have yet to see a post-conflict country where this isn't a challenge, is the balance between the idea that accountability somehow fundamentally undermines political stability, whatever that looks like in a post-conflict situation, and that accountability has to come second to rebuilding the economy or sort of some nebulous reconciliation that doesn't take into account the value of accountability in that. And you see that in conflicts all around the world. You know, the backlog of cases in Bosnia for genocide and rape, the transitional justice process in Sri Lanka, you know, it's constantly, accountability is always second and seen as sort of lesser political value. So I think that's a kind of challenge for us all to keep pressure on policymakers to not let this be a conflict where we repeat those same patterns again and again.
Our next speaker, Toby Chapman. Toby is the co-founder and head of Guernica 37 International Justice Chambers in London. He's the co-founder of G37 Law Office in Madrid and the co-founder of the Guernica Center for International Justice and also the executive director of the TNC Advisory Group. At the moment, Toby's firm is pursuing a case before the Spanish National Court on behalf of a Syrian Spanish national whose brother was abducted, tortured, and killed by the Syrian security forces. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Toby's an established international law specialist, so he looks at international criminal and humanitarian law, international terrorism, anti-corruption, maritime security, extradition and mutual legal assistance, and human rights law.
Toby's a very busy man.
I'm also Paul's lawyer, so.
And he also has a lot of expertise in international legal obligations, in the UN system of protection, and also pursuing complaints before the UN Special Procedures Branch. So talk to us a little bit about all these very many busy titles.
Thanks very much, and as I said, I am also Paul's lawyer, so I had to listen very carefully what he said, so as not to jump in and correct him. Thanks to, perfect. Thanks to Kieran for organising this. I think it's an honour to be on the panel after hearing from Hytham, a very passionate story, and it reminds me of many of the stories that I've heard where Hytham undermines how severe the treatment was that he went through. And that's something that I've encountered frequently, that many Syrian victims feel as though what's happened to them is not as bad as what's happened to some others. And I think he should be applauded for taking such a strong position and such a modest position, because what people like Hytham have been through is truly extraordinary. And it guides his passion now, which I think is remarkable. I've been involved with Syrian issues for almost as long as the revolution. I got involved and I still carry the baggage. So I'm not independent and I'm not impartial. I have very strong feelings. I do believe that there can be no political solution without justice and accountability being at the centre of it. I don't believe that it can be without full consideration of victims, as Anne has said, and there needs to be a Syrian-driven process. We're very good in the international community in dictating and showing how it should be done without real consideration of the people that it's going to affect. And I think that's something that really does need to be taken into account. And certainly, I've just come back from Geneva, where I spoke to the Office of the High Commissioner about the new UN mechanism that has been established, which I think is, as I will speak about, I think it is a positive step. But I think it needs to be done right, because we do have a lot of experience in doing things badly, unfortunately. Sorry, Syria is trying to answer me. They're just turning my phone off.
Has it got the answer?
No, it hasn't got the answer, unfortunately. Because they didn't understand the question. My background, I'm primarily a prosecutor. I'm a barrister, but I primarily prosecute. My practice is based on a victim-driven approach, which is probably why I prosecute far more than I defend. I spent 10 years in Bosnia. I was the head of the War Crimes Support Unit to the Bosnian Prosecutor's Office and helped build a national war crimes court. There are many reasons for why I went to Bosnia. Most importantly, as most people know, behind every strong man is a stronger and greater woman. And my wife was Bosnian, so she dragged me there. So I went there for a 3-month Foreign Office secondment to help on human rights cases, war crimes cases, and ended up spending 10 years there. I then returned to practice in this country, got involved with a number of different conflicts, and then was approached by a group of Syrians that were trying to pursue a civil case against the Syrian government in Washington, D.C. As a result of that, I was invited to speak at a number of conferences in Turkey, and the turning point for me, I attended a conference in Istanbul which was organised by 2 international organisations. And I was so ashamed sitting at the table that there were no Syrians around the table, and that a number of international experts were dictating how this process was going to fold out. And this was very early on. This was probably in the summer of 2011. And I had a very good friend, Syrian, who was working on the Syrian border in Antakya at the time. And I asked her, could you get a couple of judges, defected judges, that I could come speak to? And so I flew down to Antakya, walked into the room. To my surprise, there was 150 of them there. And they were judges, lawyers, prosecutors, police officers. And I had a long discussion with them about how to investigate, how to document, and how to build up institutions. Because the one thing that we have to remember is that it is Syrians that are going to have the burden of dealing with all of these cases. It is not the ICC, it is not an international tribunal. And I say that from experience of Bosnia, where you had the Yugoslav tribunal. But when I entered the prosecutor's office in Bosnia in 2004, I was presented, or 2003, I was presented with a list of 10,000 cases that we had to prosecute, that the ICTY had not been able to do. We calculated, according to our own resources, that it would take us 234 years to prosecute all of those cases. And one of the hardest roles I had was going to victims' families to say, I'm sorry, but your case won't be dealt with, because we don't have the resources. So you have to understand that it is, in a future democratic Syria, it is Syrians that are going to have to deal with a lot of these cases. And so part of what I do is to try and develop the national capacity, because that's what's required. We also have to take into account, as one of the questions which is asked at every single discussion on Syria, is why is the ICC not dealing with this? And it's very simple. It has no jurisdiction. That upsets a lot of people, that offends a lot of people, because what's the point in having a global court to deal with war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, when it has no jurisdiction to deal with the conflicts that it was set up to deal with? One, it's very easy for Syria to not ratify the Rome Statute and not fall within the jurisdiction. And of course they have their friends in Russia and China that will continue to veto any UN resolution that deals with accountability. And just 2 weeks ago, Russia again vetoed a resolution following an independent assessment that they pushed for on chemical weapon attacks. And they again vetoed it. Their role in the conflict is primarily the reason for why they have to veto this, because they could be put under investigation as well. They recently withdrew from the Rome Statute, something that they never actually joined in the first place. I remember I was asked by Russia today to comment on that, and I said, well, it's a bit like refusing to go to a party that you weren't actually invited to, because that is the reality. And they are complicit, directly and indirectly, in many of the things that we've heard from Paul, particularly the attacks on the hospitals, that are war crimes. There is no two ways about it. They are war crimes. The regime, and I will not call it a government, I will call it a regime, because it is a dictatorial regime that is targeting non-combatants, civilians, doctors, hospitals, children, elderly, characterizing them all as terrorists. That is always the response. They will use the answer, use their logic that these places are being used for terrorist activities. Now, in Paul's case, when they bombarded the facility, the building where he was stationed at that time, there was a media station. There is a document that shows an order was given to bomb that because it was being used by terrorists. There is another document that shows it was bombed because it's being used by Western journalists. That document demonstrates that that is a war crime. The other question which is frequently asked is, why is this not genocide? It is genocide in some respects, but the problem is we often think of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes on a sliding scale of severity, which is not. They are different in their scope and they're different in their legal definition. But crimes against humanity is no less significant than genocide. War crimes is not less significant than genocide. And the reason why the vast majority of crimes are war crimes and crimes against humanity and not genocide in Syria is because there is not a single ethnic group, a single identifiable group under the Genocide Convention that is being targeted. It is all opposition to the regime. Now, what the Islamic State is doing against the Yazidis, that clearly is genocide. And it's very easy to establish that as genocide. But we shouldn't say to ourselves that as it's not genocide in Syria largely, that it is less significant and it requires a less significant response, because that's absolutely ludicrous. There are war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed on a daily basis. 500,000 people have been killed. 11 million people, which is half the pre-war population of Syria, have been forced to leave their homes or have been killed. And we've heard some of these horrific accounts today. Well, what do you do about it? I mean, there has to be something we can do. We can't just sit back and do nothing. We can't wait until the conflict ends. So our group has been working with a number of other groups. We work very, very closely with a number of different Syrian groups. We work with lawyers, doctors, because in many cases it's doctors that are documenting the cases inside Syria, in particular areas, particularly what we've seen over the last few months in Aleppo. Most of this was documented by doctors. And they come to us and say, look, we have no idea how to do this properly, and we're really afraid that what we're doing will not be used in criminal proceedings because we're not doing it properly. And so one aspect of what we have to do is to train them and prepare them for doing this properly, doing this in a way where the record can be maintained, because that's the most important thing. We may not have Bashar in a court tomorrow, but we will have him in a court one day. And what we don't want to do is to be starting investigations from the ground when that time comes. So that role is very, very important. And one of the things that I stressed to you in this week is they should not underestimate the significance of that part of their new mandate. They have to use Syrians and they have to train Syrians. The other aspect is there is no international jurisdiction, so we have to look towards national jurisdiction. And this was what drew us to our case in Spain. So some of you may have heard, and I'll just carry on talking until you tell me to shut up. So, some of you may have heard about an individual called Caesar. Caesar is a very significant individual. Caesar worked for the regime. He was a military photographer in the Ministry of Defense. His job was to photograph on a daily basis, and before the conflict, he was a crime scene photographer. So if there was a death, he would be sent to photograph it. That was his job. But then there came a time when he was required to start photographing bodies in huge numbers. Because all of these thousands of individuals who had been arrested and taken to these prisons under military intelligence, and I'll get on to a bit of the hierarchy as to how this operates. But his job was to go and photograph these bodies so that it was documented. And they had numbers on bits of paper on their heads which showed the date that they were arrested, the facility where they were being held, and their death number. And there are several thousand. This does not factor in the 13,000 that Amnesty have documented, as we heard earlier. This is an additional number of between 5 and 11,000 people who were tortured and executed in these secret prisons. And the photographs are horrific. Now, I've dealt with, as I said, the conflict in Bosnia, I've dealt with Rwanda, I've dealt with the conflict in Bangladesh from 40-odd years ago. I have never seen anything like this. And I consider myself to be a relatively strong prosecutor who can detach himself from the reality of this. When you look at these photographs, it is impossible. There are children, there are elderly, there are eyes gouged out, there are burn marks from electrocution, from chemicals that they've used. There's froth coming from the mouth to show how brutal the torture was, and some of the bodies are so contorted that you can see the pain and suffering on their bodies when they died. And this man's job was to photograph this so that a pathologist could go before a judge and they could document this as somebody who died of natural causes and then get rid of the body. And that's what he did until he could take it no more. And he escaped. But he escaped with all of the images. So he smuggled out 55,000 images. He had to fake his own death so they wouldn't come after him or his family. And he came out, and very bravely, he decided that he wanted to contribute to an accountability mechanism. And he agreed to work with us. And he's spoken in public, undercover. Nobody knows his real name. Nobody knows his real identity. But he agreed to work with us, ensuring that these cases were properly documented and end up in front of the court of law. He went to US Congress and he spoke about this, thinking that this is the moment where the conflict changes. My responsibility is so great that I'm going to talk about this, and the US and the West is going to change their position and they're going to stop the conflict. And nothing happened. I advised against him doing that because I'm a lawyer, not a politician, and I want to see him give evidence in court, not in Parliament or Congress. And it impacted upon his well-being for a very long time. It affected him. But we've now got to a stage where we have this evidence, and we now have got to a stage where we've had a Spanish Syrian woman who has identified her brother in those horrible photographs. And her brother was brutally tortured. And she has agreed to act and to give a statement and to go before a Spanish court. And so on the 31st of January, we filed a case against 9 leading members of the Syrian military intelligence that are just one step below Bashar al-Assad. Now, we can't bring Bashar before a Spanish court, but we can bring the other 9. We're now waiting for the judge to rule on admissibility, and we're very confident that the judge will rule in our favour. And the Spanish legal system is very suitable for these types of cases because we act as civil parties in the proceedings. And these individuals will be tried under state terrorism laws. It's effectively crimes against humanity, but under Spanish law it comes under state terrorism. Now, there have been critics that have said dealing with these cases are raising a false sense of hope, and the expectations are too high, and you're going to destroy the Syrian community once again with nothing being done. And I disagree entirely, because this has raised hope amongst Syrian victims. I was in Berlin 2 weeks ago, where another case has been filed in Germany based on the Caesar evidence. We're now working with the Metropolitan Police here for cases to be investigated here. We have one British victim, some of you may have heard, Dr. Alice Khan, who went to Syria to help out. And he was immediately arrested, tortured, and killed. He was due to be released, his mother pleaded for him to be released, and they hung him in his cell, pumped him full of drugs so that he wouldn't struggle, so they could make it look like suicide. But the coroner's court here ruled that it was an unlawful killing. And so there is an obligation on the British authorities to investigate that. But they don't have unlimited resources. So our group has been running around Europe, Turkey, various different European countries, getting witnesses who were detained with him. People who can show that right up until that moment, he was in this one facility, and we know who was the commander of that facility, and we can prosecute that. Now, the question will always be, how are you going to get these defendants before a court? And that is, of course, the biggest challenge. And many people criticise how relations with the Syrian regime now is changing. And there are even talks about Assad being part of a political solution, and saying how awful that is. Yes, it is awful. But there is an upside to that. That means these individuals will start to travel around freely, and they can actually be arrested. They will start to have a sense of confidence that they can move in and out of Syria. And that's when we will be able to get them. We just need to be patient. We need to build very, very strong cases. I won't say watertight cases, because it doesn't exist. But in the words of the former US ambassador for war crimes, Stephen Rapp, who we work very closely with, the evidence that we have is on a scale of Nuremberg. There is a paper trail, a very clear paper trail. And the one thing that we've learned about the Syrian regime is they are, I won't use the words that I normally use in an audience like this, but they document absolutely everything. They are bureaucratic. All of these orders filter from the top to the bottom. And one of the groups that we've worked with has smuggled out 700,000 documents from Syria. Some of these documents say we need to deal with the problem because our refrigerators are full of decomposing bodies. There are documents that show that there are orders given to arrest key individuals. So all of this forms part of a case, and it will form part of a case. What I would say is, from what I've seen, this is not a handful of renegade military officers that are brutal torturers. This is a state policy to target anyone that impacts upon Assad's rule. The lady in the audience asked the question earlier, why is Assad, why is he not the great hope we all thought he was going to be? Because he has so much to lose. And his regime has so much to lose. And that's what they feared when the peaceful demonstration started. And that's why they had to break it down with this level of brutality that we have not seen for more than half a century. And I can see that I've probably not got very much time. And that's why, when you look at the industrialized torture, the mass starvation, the one picture that you will have in your memory when you look at these photographs is the Holocaust. That it is that level of brutality, and it is that level of organization. You remove Assad, you don't remove the problem. When the allegations against him were first made, and he always comes up with some flippant remark for him not being involved, he made this comment that I may be the president of the country, but I'm not in control of everything. I don't control all of the armed forces. I don't control everything that goes on in this country. His government issued a statement the very next day saying, Bashar al-Assad is the president of Syria. He is control of every state and constitutional organ in Syria, almost like you're not getting away that easily. So there is this apparatus, this regime that controls absolutely everything, and they do not want to lose it. And they will protect it by any means possible. It is very Soviet in the way it operates. It is highly bureaucratic, and the one thing that we have learned is that this is a very well organized and orchestrated state campaign against any form of uprising, and they will crush it with the utmost brutality, and that's why they must all be held to account, because Syria will never move forward. There will never be peace and stability in Syria unless you put justice and accountability at the very core. Thank you.